So at the time of publishing this video, the idea of in-game leading has been a hot topic in the scene, whether it be the discussion of the lack of in-game leadership and different content out there, whether it be Thorne's thoughts, a recent interview that Thorne and Moses did with Zeus on counterpoints, or just different discussion that you're seeing in the scene about that, or whether it be about the abundance of in-game leadership that we see coming out of, say, the Danish scene, where guys like Glaive, MSL, Snappi, karrigan, all of these guys are having a lot of success, and it's being talked about a lot because of how well their teams are doing. And all of this really just made me think about the beauty of in-game leading. As an analyst and color commentator, I spend a lot of time going through demos and matches and just different things to do research. And so I come across the beauty of in-game leading on a regular basis. And of course, many other commentators and analysts and players alike in the professional scene will all have this same experience, I'm sure. And even, a lot of fans out there who watch Counter-Strike on a regular basis can certainly notice these things as well. And so I did just want to do a video to talk about the beauty of in-game leading and the many different facets that make up in-game leading to me, all the different things that are incorporated in the idea of being an in-game leader, not just as a leader and a tactician and a strategist, but also just the roles that they play within the game and the many things that they can do. And of course, this video is really only going to scratch the surface of this idea. I'm going to keep things brief. I'm not going to go into crazy detail about things because I want to keep this video relatively short. Maybe in the future, I'll go into heavy detail about specific in-game leaders, but for this video, I just wanted to kind of throw out some of the basic concepts that I think of when I think about the beauty that is in-game leading, and then give a few examples of different in-game leaders in the CSGO scene that really seem to highlight these beautiful things about in-game leadership. So first off, there's various styles to in-game leading in Counter-Strike, whether that be like slow, methodical default style of play, or whether it be loose, aggressive styles of play, and all the different things that fall in between, as well as, very execute-prone styles, and just different styles that come together to make up what people use to approach the game. Now, there's also blending of these styles where teams are really balanced in being able to incorporate all of these styles at different points in time in the game when the opportunity arises or when it's necessary to make shifts in play. Now, even teams that dabble in all these different styles may lean more towards one direction and then just kind of incorporate the other elements of other styles on a as needed basis, or just when the moment feels right. Now, outside of just style, there's also just the idea of innovation, and this could be different boosts, or it could be different grenades that are designed, or whether it's just different tactics that are built off of some of these innovations, or off of just fundamentals of the game, really, and just kind of mixing them all together to create some type of tactic or execute that you think is best for the situation. Some of these tactics can be very elaborate with crazy timings and positioning, or like I said, really high utility usage in very precise manner. And some of it can just be like calling an audible, where you're doing one thing, but you notice something in the game as you're reading it, and so you make a shift and you pivot into a different direction and you incorporate something new. And some of these tactics can be quite basic, just relying on a lot of firepower, but using that firepower correctly. It could also be about reading your opponent. We've already talked about this a little bit before, but maybe you really base what you're doing on the type of things that your opponent does, or something that will certainly counter them in their tendencies. This comes up with like scouting your opponents, whether it be reviewing their game footage or just feeling it in the heat of the moment in the game itself as you just read different sounds or just different things that are going on in the game when it's live. Now, aside from all the tactical and strategical elements of in-game leading, in-game leaders themselves also play roles within the game as a fragger or as a support player, and there's a wide spectrum of this, whether it be opping or lurking or even being some type of entry fragger. It's really neat that as an in-game leader, you also take up some other space on the team. Maybe your opper only focuses on opping, or maybe your entry fragger always focuses on just entry fragging. But in-game leaders may have to do one of those things while also in-game leading, which is another thing that makes it really cool to see how in-game leaders handle themselves inside the game and balance everything and juggle trying to lead their team to victory while also trying to play their part in whatever fragging role it is that they are going to be participating in. It also comes down to just the recruiting process and bringing talent into the team, scouting out new talent and bringing them in as needed whenever you've reached a ceiling, or maybe you've lost a player who sought out a different opportunity, and then being able to develop that talent to fit into your system or to adapt your system to fit to a great talent. You know, there's just different aspects that come into the process of making lineup changes at the appropriate times, or even when your back's up against the wall and you get forced into one, how you handle that type of situation, how you accommodate great talent and kind of mold your team around them to really support them and allow them to carry your team to new heights. Now, certainly it's not just in-game leaders who have to do with tactics and strategy and recruiting talent. Over time, we've seen the development of the coaching role in CSGO, and certainly those guys can be involved in some of these different things. And obviously, on some teams, there's also more than just an in-game leader. There's also maybe a second mind on the team who has his wits about them and who really helps the in-game leader develop some of these things. But it's no doubt that a lot of these things that I've mentioned are certainly one of the key roles of the in-game leader. It's very diverse and there's so much to have to deal with, and that really just shows how beautiful in-game leading can be, to have to balance all of these things, to innovate, to lead the team, to adapt, read opponents, all these different things that come together while also playing a fragging role within the team. Again, in this video, I'm really only scratching the surface of these topics, not really trying to go into detail, but I will try to give a few examples. Again, I'm going to talk about a few in-game leaders here, not going to go crazy in detail about them. Maybe I'll do separate content in the future that really focuses in on what some of these players do, but I did want to just kind of gloss over a few examples just to kind of give you an idea on what some of the in-game leaders in the scene are doing or have done. So, of course, right now, as I'm recording this video, Astralis is considered the best team in the world. They've won several titles. They've really been hitting a good groove lately, and a big part of that has been the introduction of Glaive to the team as the in-game leader. And it seems like Glaive has been able to revitalize the mentality of the team. Of course, they've had a sports psychiatrist who's probably always helped with this also, but Glaive certainly has been able to kind of fire up the spirits of the men on Astralis, it seems. He hasn't necessarily revolutionized everything about how the team operates. Many of the roles for the players are the same, though there has been some tweaking with, guys like KRB and Dupree. Those roles have certainly shifted a little bit. But what he's done is he's optimized their play style, and he's created a very balanced approach to the game for Astralis, where they can work really well in default situations. They can be really good at gaining map control across middle or just other areas of the map, and being able to work from that, and Glaive reading the game and figuring out the best pivot to make, or where to execute, where the best opportunity is. But he also incorporates these really fast-paced executes that really do play to the strengths of the vast amount of firepower that he has on Astralis. And you can also see that as a player, Glaive is a very skilled player. He's also a very good fragger, and he can be a selfless type of guy. He can go in first to set up someone like KRB, but he can also play more supportive situations as well. So his role flexibility as a fragger within the game is also there. So certainly Glaive really does illustrate some of these elements that make in-game leading so beautiful in the game of Counter-Strike. Obviously, Fallen is another huge legendary name in CSGO over the past couple of years, all the way to the beginning of 2015 with Kaboom to the present, and all the different iterations that we've seen of, whether it be Keyed Stars or Luminosity, and now, of course, SK Gaming. His system has evolved over time. And he started out with Kaboom with just having these crazy executes. Everyone, of course, will remember the 5 smokes on the A-bomb side of Mirage at the beginning of 2015. That really did allow his team to catch some opponents off guard and get some crazy upset victories. But over time, he developed this really slow, methodical style of play that really seemed modeled after what was going on at Na'Vi with Zeus and his partnership with StarX whenever he was a coach later on. Really did just, make these these really well-defined roles with his players, to play these defaults, to know exactly what to do at all stages of a round, something that Moses has talked a lot about, the early stage, the middle stage, and the end stage, and how disciplined the team really was. Now, of course, over time, as people learn their role and learn what was most important, there were situations where Fallen would kind of let them a little bit loose and allow them to make plays and try to be a little bit more individualistic, but still at the core of their system was a very defined, slow style of play. But then, once that was settled, you've also seen innovation come out of Fallen with different executes. There's, of course, still some of the Mirage stuff that we talked about earlier. There's also, on Cobblestone, this mid-slope and connector attack to split the B bomb site, something I've done a behind the play episode on that you can check out. And so there's definitely been innovation on some executes even from Fallen. So just great stuff. And he is a guy who's gone through recruitment processes. Every time his team would hit a ceiling, you would see new players come in, like when Cold's Era came in, like when FNX and Taco came in, like what they're trying to do now with Phelps. And so, trying to understand when change is needed and how to best adapt to that change. On top of all of this, Fallen is also quite a skilled player. I know that at the time of recording this video, he's had a little bit of dip in form, but throughout most of 2016, when his team was winning 2 majors and having all these top 4 finishes, Fallen was one of the star players of the team in an opping role, really one of the only opping in-game leaders in CSGO's history, and certainly, he was balancing being the best in-game leader in the world, while for a time, I felt was the best opper in the world for a good stretch of time. And so that's something that's clearly very special, and it happens within this in-game leader role. And so Fallen certainly does demonstrate some of these qualities that really do make in-game leading just such a great thing to witness in Counter-Strike. You look at a guy like karrigan, and for the sake of time, I'm just going to focus on what we've been seeing with FaZe, because karrigan has done such great work with FaZe. He's brought leadership to a team that was really desperately in need of it. What he's been able to do is maintain the identity of FaZe. It's a very aggressive team, but he's been able to optimize it. He's been able to add decisiveness. He's been able to add discipline, making sure the team play is better, making sure that everyone's on the same page and the timings are better, and people are playing off of each other better. So again, he hasn't necessarily tried to revolutionize them, but he has optimized them, is probably the best way to put it. He can also be quite a skilled player at times and put up big numbers. He himself has some role flexibility between being more of a supportive guy, being sometimes a peripheral player, sometimes being in the mix of entering. Even at times he was being able to do some type of op work. So he had that role flexibility as a fragger as well. Not only that, but he's unlocked some of his players. I really felt like he unlocked Rain when he first came on the team, moving Rain into more aggressive roles, into more entry or second entry type roles, getting him more involved in, the core of the map control instead of being on the sides of the map. And I felt that he really kind of identified how to use Rain better and get more out of a talent. And now you see the same process taking place with Nico. I feel like he did a great job letting Nico play a lot of the same spots he was playing with and was comfortable with when he was on Mouse Sports. He's let that guy remain in star roles and let him do the things that made him a superstar level talent. And over time, as they get to practice and work together more, I'm sure karrigan will identify other ways to really be able to implement Nico properly and make that team strong. Or at least that's what I believe. We'll have to see what happens over time. MSL is another player from Denmark, like karrigan and like Glaive, who has also demonstrated to be a very capable in-game leader. He himself also brings a nice balanced style of play to his team. At the core, they really rely on the fundamentals in team play and being able to play defaults properly and gain map control and be able to work from it. This is a team that, to me, really showed how you can control the A side of the map on Cobblestone, the way that MSL would set up these buddy systems where 2 people are controlling long A halls and 2 people are working up mid room, and they're getting control of the dangerous stairwell, and they're pushing CTs back, and they're just getting control of that area of the map, and they're denying information to CTs. They're setting themselves up for either an A hit later, or you could slide back to B, but still keep people honest at A. Like the way that he was doing these 1-4 A splits on Cobblestone just really demonstrated the level of discipline that he could bring to a default with his teams and how he could mid-round read off of that. So definitely showing the ability to play very good default CS, but he's also brought in these really fast executes. You see these Ty Lewis type just B executes on Cash, or the Inferno where he flashes from middle and people just storm out the balcony. So being able to add these fast-paced attacks as well as being able to play the default, right? He's also very selfless as a player to set other people up. He is the type of guy who would go in first, set up someone like Config in the past, and now with AZ on the team, to go in first and be kind of the sacrifice to set someone else up on his team to be successful. He's also been good in bringing in young talent whenever some of his talent has moved on to other teams. When he brought in Kierby to Dignitas, and we saw what he was able to do with him in very early 2016. But then even after he lost Kierby, he was able to get more out of Mage's Boy. Sure, Mage's Boy already showed some good play when he was playing on SK, but it felt like MSL got even more out of him on Dignitas, and now it is North. And then certainly Config. He was getting a lot out of Config as well. Now we'll just have to see what happens, right? Because with AZ on the team, Config has had to shift into a new role, and now AZ's kind of taking up a lot of what Config used to do. And so we have to see how that plays out, but certainly so far MSL has had a good track record of dealing with lineup changes and being able to adapt either the players or the team as a whole to make things work. And so MSL, of course, another guy who illustrates a lot of the great things about in-game leading. Now, just to quickly talk about a few others, you obviously have a guy like Zeus, who was basically the master of the slow, methodical default style of play. He really did this with Navi through the bulk of his time with that team, at times coming up with cool smoke executes as well. They also did some cool stuff on the A-bomb side of Mirage, and some different things as well on other maps that was really cool when it came to executes and how nades were used. But certainly, again, kind of the master of the default style, something that Starix then later took on as the in-game leader coach, and was able to even build on that more. And this is something that Zeus has now brought to Gambit as well. We see a guy like Snappi, a guy who wasn't even an in-game leader in any sense before his time on Heroic, but he's been able to build a cool system there. He's been able to give them this aggressive identity, but also trying to balance the playbook between, doing really well-defined CS where everyone's doing what he asked, but also at times cutting players loose to be playmakers. And he's been able to incorporate new talent like Valda, like Nico, now Yugi. And I think they still have to find a little bit better balance. I actually did a big interview with Madi about Snappi as an in-game leader, so I just kind of refer you to that if you want to hear more about Snappi. But this guy is a guy who really has shown what can happen, even if you aren't a guy who has a reputation for being an in-game leader for an extended period of time, how that if you just accept that role as your own and you really go all in on it, and you really put in the time and the effort to do all the things you need to do to be a successful in-game leader. You watch the demos, you grind through finding new setups or what have you. You put in the work, that if you really own the role, that you can develop it and you can become good at it, even if it's not something that you're historically known for, so to speak. I think that's kind of one thing to really think about with Snappi. You think of somebody like Stanislaw in the NA scene. This guy is one of the beacons of hope and in-game leadership in the NA scene nowadays. He's very flexible with his roles. He's usually preferred being a lurker, but he's been a guy that could be like an MSL type character and maybe be a little bit, sacrificial and go and first set someone else up. He can be quite a skilled player. He, in general, brought a looser style of play to the game, but he was great at getting the team play working and getting people on board with each other and setting up this efficient system of trading to be able to push into a site with a lot of firepower and just trade their way in and make sure that everyone was going and that everyone was following through. He also was able to cherry pick tactics from other teams, like some of the nip stuff he would bring to Cobblestone and Cash. And this is a good skill of an in-game leader, to be able to see other things that are going on in the scene and bring them, under your own play, but maybe tweak a little bit to make it work for your players or what have you, but to be able to notice things that are great out there in the scene and be able to incorporate it into your own team. And I think that is another good skill to think about when you think about in-game leading. And you have a guy like Existent. Sure, he's not on top teams now, but even what he's doing with LDLC is really cool stuff, fostering up, younger talent in the French scene. He was really known for these elaborate executes with a high utility usage, which is something you still see a lot on LDLC. Go watch an LDLC demo on Cobblestone and see how he's attacking the B-bomb site, how many nades are used, the timings of them. It's really elaborate stuff. He's also one of the ones that, even going back in the Counter-Strike source, was showing you some cool Inferno executes, like the Apartments explosion with the pop flash from middle that many teams are using on Inferno even today with the new Inferno that's come out. So this is another guy who was just really good at coming up with these crazy executes, and he was another type of player who'd be willing to go in first and be an entry type player if need be to set someone else up. So you really can just see how much he's brought to the game. And again, it's not just in-game leaders. Coaches have brought innovation to the game. Think about some of the things that Threat has done with different smoke grenades, particularly on Cobblestone, but also some executes he's come up with on the A-bomb side on Cash when he was coaching in IP and still is doing now. Zeus has brought innovations in here and there as well. Look at my first episode of Behind the Play, where Zeus is coming up with ways to smoke the A-bomb site from that what's called like useless room between the mid garage and the B lobby, and how we can use that to set up fakes and things. He's also the one that came up with the decoy grenade on Cash that you throw from there that lets you open the door the opposite direction to set up your opper to take a new pick that couldn't be done before. That's back when he was still coaching, when they were Luminosity last year. So coaches can bring innovation as well in in-game leader type roles, which is something Threat was doing for a time with NIP. And again, these is just scratching the surface. This is just some examples. There's other great in-game leaders out there, like Blade, like Gabi, like Pronax, like a Sean Gares, and then coaches who did in-game leading from the coaching role, like a Starix, like a Peacemaker, like a Kasai when he was on Mouse Sports, and now trying to do it with Renegades. Again, it's just, in-game leading has so much to it, and that's what makes it so great. Again, you could see the various styles that are put into place and how they're balanced, how they're blended, how maybe you have a leaning more towards one and you really master it. You can see the innovation, whether it be smokes or executes or something. You can see how elaborate tactics can really get. You can see the reading of opponents, the scouting that takes place. You can see the recruiting aspect, how you bring in new talent, how you adapt and mold when new talent comes in, how you play to your strengths of the talent you have in your lineup, how you try to cover for your weaknesses. You can see how also the in-game leader can be a very skilled player, can be one that, in Fallen's case is a crazy opper, and other cases really good rifler, like a Glaive, like a Stanislaw, like some of these other players. So not only are they leading a team, but they're also playing a pivotal role as a fragger within their team, perhaps. You can see in cases like Stanislaw, being able to pick up really good tactics that other people are doing and realizing how great that is and incorporating it into your own playbook. And again, I've tried to lift some examples of how some of these different in-game leaders have done some of these things, or maybe have done some other things that have made just the idea of in-game leading something that's truly amazing to watch and follow. And so yeah, I just wanted to use this video to talk a little bit about the idea of the beauty of in-game leading. Again, just scratching the surface, not going in crazy detail. Maybe I'll look at some of these in-game leaders I've used as examples in more detail and other content in the future. But I hope that from watching this, you can just really see how much there really is to in-game leading and how awesome it can be to follow. And hope you enjoyed this video, and please subscribe for more content. Thanks so much.